time to ramp up action and usher in the fairer, cleaner city that we know is 100% possible. We acknowledge that the Zero Carbon Plan will be voted on at the next council meeting. It's taken a long time, which only makes it even more important to implement speedy and ambitious measures to cut emissions. Today, we want to impress upon you the importance of decarbonisation and energy-efficient housing. We can produce our own renewable energy, we can stop burning gas to power our community's favourite pool, and we can install heat pumps and upgrade insulation to ensure everyone in Dunedin lives in a warm, dry home. So when you come to decide on the Zero Carbon Plan, you know that the community backs these viable actions. We challenge you to be brave in ensuring a safe climate and a better future for our communities. We'd also like to invite you all to a documentary screening on homegrown energy, 7 p.m. August 16th at yours. It's a documentary 350 Aotearoa has made called We Can Produce Our Own Power, and there's lots of lessons for us here in Ōtepoti. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are you happy to take questions? We have one from Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, and in particular for the specific requests. I'm hoping that you'll be able to confirm that you'll raise those as part of our formal annual plan processes, so that as we debate budgets for the coming year that's currently being consulted on, and for the 10-year plan that will follow on from that we can actually give effect as quickly as possible to what you're arguing for. Are you happy to do that?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Next we have Hazel Salter and Karen Anderson on behalf of the Dunedin Area Citizens Association. Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor,
Good morning.
councillors. My name is Karen Anderson, and this is Hazel Salter. We belong to the Dunedin Area Citizens Association. I am going to read the submission, that Hazel will also answer some questions if there are any. Just a background, I am actually a nurse as well as a farmer, but I've been nursing for a great many years. I've nursed in the public hospital here since 1996, and I also nurse up at Mercy Hospital, which is the private hospital here. So we're just wanting to present the diabolical state of Dunedin parking. Dunedin services a huge area and is a main route for the north and the south. As such, many people come from out of town to Dunedin for various things, such as medical, dental, ophthalmology, etc. appointments. In doing this, they will attempt to coordinate these appointments with other ones, i.e. banks, solicitors, accountants. They may even shop. They expect convenient parking to attend these things, but find instead inconvenient parking or none at all. Also, those workers at the hospital and other businesses find the lack of parking such that some have to leave at 5 in the morning to find a free park and then sit in their cars for an hour before starting work. Those that find that they have to get a paid park find it costs up to $30 per day. Thus, a lot of staff are actually leaving the DHB for either hospitals with easier parking somewhere else, or going overseas, and there's quite a few of those at the minute. Lack of parking is exacerbated by the street works. While some of these are needed, there are those that are vanity projects. These disruptions have led to parking being unavailable, thus leading to businesses losing trade and closing down, as in these economic times, They could not afford to keep going. Businesses across the railway line are also losing trade as their customers are having problems accessing parking as the all-day parkers are taking over them. Disabled find it difficult to access parking for a quick small errand, as there are none. At the back of farmers, the parking there has been given way to yellow lines. All over the city, yellow lines, protrusion, curbings, etc. have increased the erosion of parks in the name of safety. Expectation to use buses is difficult as they are unreliable and limited numbers. And if out-of-towners are expected to use buses, there needs to be car parking on the outskirts for them to use. Consideration should have been given to a multi-storey parking in the hospital. And while you might argue that that is the hospital's problem, as a council, it is your duty to ensure ratepayers' opinions, welfare and best interests are considered as you that serve them. It is apparent that the council staff are making the decisions that affect us. They were not elected by us, and while there are those that are good at their jobs, there are those that are driven by ideology rather than a desire to do the best for the Dunedin ratepayers. As councillors, we understand your role in governance, but we look to you to keep a respectful close eye on staff aspirations. A sitting councillor at one of the Meet the Candidates meetings told us that prior to submissions being called for, decisions are often already made. Finally, it needs to be remembered that Dunedin is a large service town and not like large European cities it has been likened to. Lose the services and Dunedin will not grow. Dunedin and Otago are also a very unique place in their rural and urban aspects, and this always needs to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Landers.
Regarding the planning for parking for the new hospital, were you aware of a meeting that senior nurses had with Mr. Fleming, who was previously leading the hospital rebuild project? And upon being questioned about what the plans were for parking around the new hospital, said something to the effect of, by the time the hospital is built, cars will be self-drive, so there will be no need for car parks. Are you aware of this attitude from at least one of the hospital leaders?
I was very aware of Chris Fleming's attitude towards that because I'd heard him speak myself at another meeting. And he said that we'd never had to worry about cars because it would be all self-driven. But the thing is, he doesn't understand what our hospital here provides a 24/7 service. And if you have a heart attack or you've got a bleeding spleen and you want your staff to be there, you do not have time. You have to get there. It's I don't know how it would work. As my
So in your view, the idea that self-drive cars won't reduce the need or obliterate the need for car parks, you don't see that that's sensible in any way?
I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that at the present we need to be our needs need to be addressed. I understand for the future it can be very different from what we see at the minute, but they could have built a car park at the hospital to be utilised then as things progressed and cars, I don't know, evolve, and then that space in the hospital that was car park could be used, incorporated into different parts as a hospital grows.
Right, so you actually accept that it may be the case that by the time the hospital is built, that car parking won't be required?
If you're expecting that it will be 50, maybe.
Councillor Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are you familiar with the provisional research that Council has based its decisions and developments on, the MR Cagney report?
No?
Could I, with respect, suggest to you that you might like to look at it? It's on the GCC website. If you search Dunedin parking roadmap, you'll get reasons for the developments that are underway right now to ensure, in particular, better wayfinding for the parking that exists, which they believe is more than enough for the city.
I will look at it,
Thank you.
but I have to say I am not a politician. I work very hard at what I do to provide a very good service for my patients and my people.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Moving on to item 3 on our agenda. We have apologies from Councillors Wiley, Walker and Houlihan for absence, and also for early departure from Councillor Gilbert. Any others?
Can I add my early departure at 3 p.m. if required? I have another appointment I have to go to.
Yes. So that's another for early departure. So I move that council accepts the apologies, these 3 for absence and 2 for early departure. Do I have a seconder for that? Yep. Deputy Mayor Barker. With the motion, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So the next item, I would like to acknowledge the passing of a community board member, Mr. Brian Miller, who was a very strong community advocate and part of the Moscow-Tari Community Board. And he was one of those local community leaders who never left us in any doubt about his views and had a knack for capturing public's attention, especially during his election campaigns. I remember his drench container campaign in particular. That was quite a novel approach and did capture, did put his name into great public awareness. He was also a passionate advocate over many years, and he was known for his enthusiasm and vigour in his advocacy. So on behalf of the council, I'd like to thank him for his service, and his passing will be felt by all his loved ones, his colleagues, and the wider Moscow-Tari community. So we send our condolences and sympathies to all who knew him. Thank you for that, Robert. Do we have anyone with further comment? Thank you. So next item on the agenda is the confirmation of the agenda. And so I move that council confirms the agenda without additional alteration. Do I have a seconder for that? Deputy Mayor Barker. Any comment? Okay. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Declarations of interest. Are there any changes or updates to declarations of interest? Very good. There being none, I move that the council notes the elected members' interest register as attached, attachment A in your agendas, and confirms the proposed management plan for elected members' interest. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Manning. Any comment? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Item number 6, confirmations of the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on 27 June 2023, as attached in the order paper. I move that council confirms the public part of the minutes of the ordinary council meeting as a correct record. Do I have a second for that? Councillor Withall. Do we have any comment? In which case I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Reports. The actions from resolutions of council meetings. There is a report attached. Firstly, do we have any comment from Chief Graham?
I'm happy to take questions, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, are there any questions of the report? There, I guess we do. Councillor Lewis.
Sorry, I was just wondering whether you had, I note that you said July 23 that you're having a meeting scheduled with the acting Vice Chancellor. I'm just wondering whether you had that meeting, whether there's any update on that.
The meeting is in August.
Yep.
Excellent. So there being no further questions, I'll put the motion that the council notes the open and completed actions from resolutions of council meetings as attached. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Gilbert. Do we have any comment? Anyone like to speak to the motion? There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item number 8, the Forward Work Programme for Council, July 2023. Do we have any comments from the Chief? Do we have any questions for the Chief? There being none, I'll put the motion. The council notes the updated council.
Mr. Chairman,
Ah,
sorry, I have a question about the item on page 58 in the table about vacant inner city space, the action, the progress to date on the council resolution. Is the Chief Executive confident that that work will be ready for the purpose of informing the annual plan?
The 10-year plan.
At this point, I am confident.
any further questions? Councillor Malley.
That's the work on variation 3 coming through. It's due to be notified at the start of next year. I'm actually just wondering whether the noise ordinance work is going to be in that variation.
No, not changing the noise, but changing the consulting on the insulation standards.
But that's the total of what will be done in that variation in terms of noise ordinance.
That's my current understanding.
Councillor Leesburg.
Thank you. A further question on page 59, the second last item on the page, the aquatics review. The original discussion last year asked also for discussions with not just the Ministry of Education but also the Therapeutic Pool Trust. The last report we had was that there had been some discussion, but they didn't lead to anything. And I'm wondering if there had been any progress or any advice that we could be given about the status of that trust and the old physio pool itself.
I can't today give you any advice on the status of that trust. What I can say is that the aquatics report will come to council sooner rather than later and be slightly more encompassing than originally thought, because there are a range of things that we think we would like to flag well in advance of the tender plan for council to consider.
There being no further questions, I'll move that council notes the updated forward work programme as shown in attachment A. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Ackland. Would anyone like to speak to the motion? There being no speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item number 9. The DCC submission on the draft Tourism Environment Action Plan 2023. Welcome Ms. Vanderbilt and Mr. Christie to the chairs. Would you like to speak to the report?
No, happy to go straight to questions, Mr. Mayor.
Straight to questions. Firstly, Deputy Mayor Barker.
Good. I had a question about, which number was it, our submission, and I just wonder whether we could just look at Pat's wording a couple of things more strongly that I think we as a council are passionate about, which was paragraph 11 around the interregional passenger transport. The wording in there is about that, but I think that we might strongly advocate for interregional passenger transport, whether it's by rail or by bus. I think specifically focuses on bus. And the second thing clause number 15, we note that the government needs to appropriately fund and support the draft tourism plan. And I wonder, in the past we used to have a Ministry of Tourism, and I wonder whether we might advocate for, again, having a Ministry of Tourism because within MB, and also strongly advocate that it's funded, given what happened with the destination plans, which was let's fund the making of, but not fund the doing of.
So if I could, a couple of those changes would, to my mind, be more than minor, editorial, and so would need some agreed wording from council to be included.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted to suggest a sentence,
Okay.
or because at the minute, the resolution only allows me to make minor editorial changes. To strongly support would probably be all right, but to include a new Ministry for Tourism, probably more than minor editorial. But
Okay.
if council's happy that that's a minor editorial change, but to my mind it's slightly more than that.
Thank you.
Finished? Councillor Gary?
Thank you. I'm interested just to unpick 16. I'm very happy with the wording, but I wondered how you envisaged that those, so the sentence, the DCC notes that this would involve contribution to local conservation initiatives. Do you see that as like a donation system for visitors, or how do you see that playing out?
So there's initiatives now already in place around the country where it's either giving back as a donation or actually actively taking part in activities to enhance the environment, plantings and things like that. So it just really depends on what areas that they're actually supporting. Some it will always be more beneficial to actually give financial assistance to let the experts do the job, but where they can actually have hands-on, that's to be encouraged.
So do you consider that we're well placed here in Dr. Puri Dunedin with projects in place already to link into? It's my impression that that's so, but I'm interested what you both think about that.
Yes, there are, and also I think we've just got to get into the mindset of looking broadly at what people can be involved in, and making the visitor aware, actually, because we're not really that good as a nation and getting out there and saying, even those that are giving now don't really advertise it, and if it's advertised that you're actually giving, the businesses and all are actually giving to conservation efforts, people are actually more inclined to actually invest more themselves. So it's an area that we really need to get smart in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions? So that being the case, Deputy Mayor Barker has moved the motion. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Gary? Yes, okay, so before we move the motion, we were looking at this addendum. We might need,
We just have an adjournment, Mr. Mayor.
yes, so I move we adjourn for a couple of minutes to get this resolved. Seconded Councillor Fiso. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. that we have in front of us. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Gilbert, would you like to speak to it?
I was very pleased to see this come through. Tourism's been a leader for a long time and been looking at regenerative tourism. I absolutely support this draft submission, and the plan came from the focus on government's focus on industry transformation plans, and they've identified 8 industries which can grow and transform with significant potential to contribute to high productivity, high wage, low emission economy that offers resilience in good times and bad. And I really love the mission that the draft Environment Action Plan has, which is to empower the tourism industry to help restore the Māori of our climate and environment by swiftly achieving carbon zero targets and embracing a regenerative approach. And I think given the public forum that we had earlier, we really do need to focus on our carbon. So the plan is based on the regenerative tourism model, which is one that gives back more than it takes from the environment, and it has at its heart to tie our nature and planet. And I absolutely respect that this is where the plan came from, about caring for the land, our role in the universe. And the bit I love the most is we give special care to the tiniest living creatures, and that's where this plan comes. And the symbol for the plan is the Piwaka Waka, which is a symbol of hope. And I think that given what we listened to in the public forum this morning, we do need to have that in our hearts. We've just adopted the Dunedin Destination Plan, and we would have noted, that was just a little while ago, that this has at its heart regenerative tourism and world-leading environmental practices. This plan also aligns with our own carbon zero goals, our environment strategy, and our city direction. So we are all on that journey to give back more than we take from the environment. And I just want to note that a recent survey showed that 95% of New Zealanders plan to travel domestically or internationally within the year. So when we're talking about tourists, we're talking about ourselves as well. So we do need to look in the mirror. Tourism is not a thing over there. It is us all together who are also planning to travel, and we need to think about where we're going, not just our destination, but how we're getting there, etc. This is 3 pillars, which is understanding and adapting tourism to climate change, transforming the industry to a low carbon emissions industry, and the bit that I love the most, restoring biodiversity and ecosystems through tourism. I asked the questions about the shortfalls in the interregional passenger transport. When we look at decarbonisation, it's really important to actually have less transport, and which would include, in our perfect world, perhaps an electric train to Christchurch. And we are calling for passenger transport. That's why I asked for that to be strengthened. And then also, back in the olden days, we used to have a Ministry of Tourism, and we have a Minister of Tourism, but we don't have a ministry, and it's sucked up in that behemoth, which is MB. And I think that it gets quite lost within MB and not having the proper consideration of it. I support the national work to assess the environmental impacts of visitors. We absolutely need to know what their impacts are to be able to manage them. Definitely need to look at the shore power for cruise ships. That's a big issue as well. We see them in our own harbour. And I also want the plan to be funded, as I said in the questions, you can't have these plans and not fund them, and that's been one of the falls down of destination plans before. I know Councillor Gary asking about donations and funding back to the operations, and a few years ago when I worked for the Peninsula Trust, I did the Dunedin Wildlife Care Code, which I hope everyone's read and understands. And at the end of that, we had volunteer or donate to Dunedin Wildlife and Conservation charities, which just explicitly mentioned the Wildlife Hospital. We have a page where people can go, can donate, can volunteer, can also become activists for nature as well. And I had a lot of experience out there. Out at the Albatross, we raised a lot of money to help the Department of Conservation with the Albatross, and we ended up, getting money to buy water to spray the Albatross to keep them cool. Very, very important. But for locally, tourism is really important to Dunedin. Pre-COVID, it brought in over $700 million into our economy, and that's really important for creating jobs. About 5% of employment and 5% of business numbers were in tourism. And we've always been ahead of the game. We are the wildlife and heritage capital of New Zealand, and over half of people come here because of our heritage and because of our wildlife as well. So when we look at the tourism operations here, we have Penguin Place, regenerative tourism, looking after penguins, got an amazing little penguin rehab, rehab for health, not for other reasons. The yellow penguins, of course, are the rarest in the world. We've got the blue penguins pukakura, which at one stage the penguins are increasing by 13% per year. And there's a whole lot of revegetation going on in there. So that is a Māori tourism organisation as well. So it's a prime example, not just because I volunteer there, but I absolutely believe in what they're doing. I just talked a little bit about the albatross colony and how they support DOC. And when I was there, we raised a lot of money to go into conservation. Otakanuri Eco Sanctuary as well, which is another charity, which has also come to council for support, and we need to think about those things as well. Of course, I have to mention Lana Castle and other heritage attractions, because that is also about conservation, about conserving our heritage and storytelling and creating that for our visitors. So I'm really pleased to see this plan through. It's not perfect, but I have looked at all of the people that are putting the plan together and totally respect who they've chosen to lead the plan. And I just look forward to hopefully the new Ministry of Tourism funding the plan and getting on with it, because tourism is an innovative and creative leader, and will show everyone how it's done. Thank you.
Other speakers? Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's my pleasure to speak around the submission on the draft Tourism and Environment Action Plan 2023. Given we are the wildlife capital of New Zealand and visitors are attracted here because of that, there is wonderful work being done focused on that. However, when I was a tour guide 7 years ago, I noted that some of the iconic attractions in Dunedin wouldn't even agree to have a collection box on their front counter for various local projects, and there are many of them. And I would hope that now that has changed, and 7 years later there's a very different attitude. But I do want to focus on one particular aspect of the submission, and that is paragraph 16, where it talks about any initiative to increase the visibility of where and how visitors can give back to Aotearoa New Zealand. And we note that this could involve contribution to local conservation initiatives and sequestration of efforts, including achievement of local emission reduction or biodiversity goals. Now, it was my pleasure on Saturday to participate in one of these very projects. And I wanted to speak to that because it was around giving back and around the visibility of that. And it was on the slopes of Harbour Cone, and a well-known group called STOP, led by a woman called Lala Fraser, who's been doing this work for many, many years. That group's been planting a future forest for some time. They were given 1,000 trees by Trees That Count as a celebration for the FIFA festival, for the FIFA World Cup. And also offsets some of the emissions from that particular event. And one of the FIFA representatives was there, the sustainability manager for FIFA, and I want to tell you about her reaction, having climbed up the hill with us all, and planted some trees, been instructed to how to, and been talking to all the volunteers who do this every Sunday and every Tuesday, and other local people who come from all over the city to help. She was gobsmacked. She's from Melbourne. She was gobsmacked at this initiative and incredibly impressed, was going back to talk to her local community about what might be done and wondered if there was anything like this. So it's around that visibility and making it possible for people to not only do but contribute to the doing of, to these amazing local projects that are already in place. And it's about, as Ms. Van Iliad said, it's about connecting those up and making them visible. So I applaud that particular paragraph and support the submission.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervis.
I'm trying to understand what exactly is meant by scaling of interregional passenger transport. Obviously, it's something to do with fish. It's something to do perhaps with increasing the number of people that are using interregional passenger transport. The idea that we're going to reduce our carbon footprint by introducing new rail, for instance, with the enormous infrastructure that would involve, and the idea that we're going to reduce our carbon footprint by actually getting more tourism happening seems to me to run counter to the current trend of wanting 15-minute cities and everybody to stay in their closely packed homes. I mean, it may be that there are some opportunities here to make tourism more environmentally friendly. I personally think that if we're going to do a lot of investment into tourism, we should increase and broaden our tourism offering. I've previously mentioned the potential of the Taieri Gorge whitewater rafting as something which could help make the train ride up the Taieri Gorge a much more interesting venture. I've already mentioned a number of times that Karatani area has the largest sea caves in the Southern Hemisphere, which used to be available by kayak, but now no longer are. And then there's the other issue of access for cruise ship passengers to our absolutely stunning and unrivaled coast, which could be facilitated if we were able to persuade the ORC to allow heli tours to start from the wharf and go around our coastal area. To me, these are the kind of things that would help develop our tourism, make it a more attractive place to come, not simply rely on our heritage. And the idea that we are going to basically run tourism in a way that is going to reduce greenhouse gases, to me, is a contradiction in terms. If you want more tourism, invariably, there's going to be a carbon footprint associated with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilbert. Thank you. In many ways, we do lead the country in our approach to tourism, and as has been pointed out on a regular basis, in fact, at least twice in the last 10 minutes, we are the wildlife and heritage capital of New Zealand. There are lots of initiatives within the industry where they're already trying to tackle much of what is touched on through the submission. I'm very happy to be seconding it for several reasons. There are three main bits in there that resonate quite strongly with me. I have concerns about the cruise ships, the impact that the cruise ships have coming on, and whilst it is mentioned in the submission about the impact that they have, we're unsure of that. So I look forward to more detail being able to come out from that, particularly with our zero carbon approach, as it says in the submission, that overall marine emissions will need to reduce by 40% and perhaps greater reduction in the cruise sector. So shining a bit of a light on that is one of the bits that appeal to me. Another aspect on it is that the creation of the Ministry of Tourism. So I'm very happy to see that appear in this amendment. We can't do this on our own, basically. Try as we might, and we are good. We're just not that powerful, that strong, that influential across the board. So whilst, if you'll excuse the pun, the boat was missed a little through COVID, when that might have been a particularly good time to revisit our national approach to tourism. Now is the time, more than tomorrow, for the government to actually step up and do what they really need to. And I think the best way of doing that is with a Ministry of Tourism. It's all very well and good having somebody with a label, but having a department that actually does some work is probably going to be a little more effective. So I'm very happy to be supporting this. Thank you. Councillor Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to touch on that paragraph 11 because it's a bit close to what's quite close to my heart. Interregional transport, passenger transport is something that's been coming up at regional transport committees around the country now because it's been a recognised shortage. And we're not talking about city to city, we're really talking about town to city and town to town. So for us, Councillor Van Der Bus is quite right. If you a tourist arriving in New Zealand generally has already come with a massive carbon footprint upon arrival. And tourism is going to have that effect until we can get around the carbon footprint of air travel. However, that doesn't mean that upon arrival we then ignore the fact that when they get here, we don't try to make it as efficient as possible. For young tourists, the idea of using public transport to go from place to place is quite common around the rest of the parts of the world, but it's not practical in New Zealand because once you get to a town of a certain size, there simply won't be a bus there. Or if it does come, it comes at once a day at a certain time. So that strengthening, that's quite good. And I hope that, in fact, we generally demonstrate that we do strongly support it by following that through at the Regional Transport Committee with the appropriate work that needs to be done there. Councillor Barker mentioned shore power. I do recall that when we were looking at the ships, the cargo ships that were coming in and making a fair amount of noise at the port, we were told at the time that Aurora didn't have the capacity to deliver shore power. So we need to remember that when we're writing our letters of expectation, to see if we really do want that to happen. And I think on the other one, I just checked in the interim before we came back with Councillor Barker about whether this was covering the tourist levy, and that she thought it was somewhere else where that levy is being covered. But bottom line is, there's a lot of demand to come to New Zealand already by tourists. I think that we need to set that levy at a certain level so that we can do a lot towards dealing with the environmental and social impact of tourism on New Zealand. And especially, you could conceive that if that levy was high enough, it could actually go a long way to underwriting a lot of the costs of some of these transport initiatives that we're talking about. Thank you very much.
Yes, I've just got a couple of comments in particular about this paragraph 11, interregional passenger transport, because one of the things that is often mentioned is the getting rid of motor cars, and there's been a push to get rid of cars, but we don't have viable alternatives. And so the number one thing to me is to have convenient and reliable alternatives to motor cars. So to me, the great starting place would be a loop tram around the inner city of Dunedin, which would be ideal for tourists to go and get around the CBD of Dunedin and visit all our tourist attractions in a very convenient, reliable and easy, also inexpensive way. And if that was electrified, that would make a significant difference to our carbon emissions and reduce the need for taxis and such, but also reduce the need for the locals to take their cars into the middle of town and want to move them around the CBD. In fact, they'd be able to use that loop tram to get around. And then we do have a really good, efficient way of getting people from Mosgiel to Dunedin, tourists out to Mosgiel, and locals from Mosgiel into town to work. And that would be the railway line that runs through the hills that surround Dunedin. So it's actually quicker to get a train from Dunedin to Mosgiel on the railway line. So the convenience and reliability is the key determining factors for public transport. So that would make a significant difference. And thereafter, an electric train that ran from here to Christchurch and possibly even expanding from Picton to Invercargill would unite the whole of the South Island in an overall public transport plan of very low carbon. So that would be one way that we could, that whole system would reduce our carbon emissions quite significantly and fits exactly with the three presentations we've heard at Public Forum, because it would also obviate the need for so much parking in the inner city because you get around the inner city on the loop tram. So all of those three things need to be considered as a whole, as an ecosystem of public transport. But the natural first one to start with would be the loop tram around the inner city so that people do have the mechanism to get around the inner city and our tourist attractions. One of the other sub-benefits that would happen, and my expectation would be that we get lots of tourists from Christchurch coming down to Dunedin because, they don't have much wildlife or heritage in Christchurch compared to us. So a nice holiday by the seaside would be a really good thing for them to come down and have a look at. So your right of reply, Deputy Mayor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we talk about, Councillor Gary brought up collecting for
for wildlife, etc. And I mentioned that we do have the Wildlife Care Code and also the Wild Dunedin Festival, which is and spearheaded to make sure that everyone focuses on Wild Dunedin. Councillor Vandervis talked about the scaling and providing low carbon transport, and I think a lot of the other councillors have traversed that, and also tourism product development, which we have talked about in the Dunedin Destination Plan, and we will certainly be looking at that product development as part of the way forward. So ideas are gratefully received because I do think we need to think about this. Anyway, this plan is about tourism transformation and carbon. Councillor Gilbert talked about the impact of cruise ships, and I think there is a few paragraphs on decarbonisation and talking about with cruise ships, a combination of biofuels, hydrogen and electric power could provide a pathway. It's very interested in Councillor O'Malley saying that Aurora couldn't provide the electrification, and I think that's those big infrastructure things, because if we are talking about moving away from fossil fuels, then we need to look at what our infrastructure is like. And then leading through to infrastructure is talking about Mr. Mayor talking about public transport. Like the words ecosystem of public transport. When you're a visitor, sometimes it's very hard when you go places to get places. And I think that if we do have that good, reliable public transport, I used the bus this morning, was on thinking about if you're a visitor, how do you come into a city and understand the public transport system? And then how do you visit our attractions? So I think there's some really good things raised, which a lot are addressed in this draft plan. And I think the great thing is it's a draft plan, it's out for consultation. We're all giving our feedback, and I look forward to the final plan because there's a lot of differing views. Look forward to it happening and getting funded in the new Ministry of Tourism.
Well, let's help make it happen. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
No, report it, please.
Very good. Carried. I think it's 11-1, is it? We've got to sing this. I think there appear to be 12 of us here.
Yeah.
Very good. Next item, number 10. The Local Government New Zealand AGM meeting remits. The Chief will speak to the report.
So, and Claire will provide any process advice, Ms. Sullivan, if we need it. But as you'll see, councillors, there are a range of remits that have been through the process that LGNZ run to get them up onto the AGM agenda. Historically, this council has provided the voting delegate with the authority to decide on council's behalf, unless there were particular remits where the council wished to provide the delegate with very clear guidance. So what we have done in here, as you'll see, is go through each of them. There is some where this council has already endorsed them for inclusion on the agenda. Others that support current DCC policy positions or operational practice, and others where it's a bit of a free hit in terms of what you might wish to decide. There was one that you had previously declined to support, but on KiwiSaver, that has come back with slightly differently worded, so you may want to reconsider your position on that. Claire and I can provide advice on process. The GMs will be able to provide any subject-specific advice if you have them about how it aligns with council policy.
And just from my point of view, it looks like lots 1 to 7 plus 11 are all okay. So are there any questions on those? Just for start. No. Councillor Vandervis.
Regarding the KiwiSaver proposal,
So let's start with 1 to 7 plus 11, just to dismiss those that first tranche. Goes. I just thought it'd be good to deal with them in 2 lots.
Could you clarify they're okay?
Well, yes. What as written in your order paper, they've already been discussed by council and endorsed by council.
Thank you. No.
No. Lots 1 to 7 plus number 11.
No. So the ones that have been endorsed by council at this point only remit 1 and remit 3. The other ones, the next group, support council policy positions, but the council hasn't formally agreed to support those remits at LGNZ.
Yes, I wasn't planning to. This is in terms of questions, just so that in terms of questions to the chief, because we're still in question time. And any
My
questions
question was clarification of that because, yeah.
Questions got a few more. Yes. So, Councillor Alley.
It's just the rates rebate. What's the number right now? Do you know? It's about 300, isn't it? It's not very much.
Number you're referring to, councillor? So the amount of the rebate?
Yeah.
So the maximum is $750. Yeah, but it's scaled based on income and the value of the rates. There's a very complicated table that sits in the application form that gives examples to ratepayers.
Thank you. So, Deputy Mayor Varga.
Question around remit 5, ability for co-chairs at formal meetings, and that was one that appeared a little confusing to me. Was it when there was no deputy chair that they were suggesting co-chairs?
My understanding is that there are some councils that want co-chairs full stop and sometimes not. Someone who is the regional council, for example, have joint standing committee chairs who aren't chair and deputy. And technically that's quite challenging under standing orders as they're currently written. It might be that, for example, where you have an external party who is appointed to a committee, you might want them to co-chair because they bring particular, but not be a deputy necessarily. At the minute, it's not allowed under standing orders. Given that we are reviewing standing orders, we thought that this is something that is at least worth a discussion.
Right. So, Councillor Gary.
On page 13, this is the local election accessibility. Sorry, number 4, page 94, original page 13. The local election accessibility. Do we have any idea why it says there is no good reason for such an exclusion? In other words, it's can be accessed for general election, but not for local elections. Do we have any idea how they arrived at how that decision was arrived at initially? Is there any?
No, there's no good reason as far as we can see.
Right. Okay, so there we go. Moving along to the rest of the remits. Do we have any questions on any of those? Councillor Adams.
Regarding the KiwiSaver remit that's proposed, is there any precedent for a council or any other general rate-funded body to make contributions to a person who is essentially a self-employed person? Is there any precedent for it?
I can't. I'm sorry. Well, the part of the way this resolution was originally worded, that was the concern that staff had as independent contractors, with elected members being independent contractors, how that potentially opened us up as a council for all other independent contractors to potentially have legal precedent. But this wording has changed, but I can't provide any advice on if there are precedents out there.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions? Councillor Vince-Vote.
I don't know if the Chief Executive can help with this, but given the remuneration situation that governs all of us and local government New Zealand wide, if there were to be inclusion of a KiwiSaver membership potential, I assume that the payments would come from that envelope, that window, or would that have to be sourced elsewhere?
My understanding is that what's been proposed is the envelope would be increased by 3 or 4%, depending on the nature of the KiwiSaver contribution. So it would be rate funded.
So,
Do we have any further questions about any of the remits? Councillor Gary.
This one is number 8, the establishing of a resolution service. I wondered if the staff had any further comment on that. Any additional comments?
No, we don't.
So, looking at how to deal with this, I'm thinking.
I could provide some.
Yes.
Yeah. Did someone move the recommendation potentially?
I'm happy to remove the recommendation.
Okay, so Deputy Barker is happy to move the recommendation that delegates to the voting delegates to the voting delegate the authority to determine DCC's position for the remits submitted to LGNZ AGM. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor O'Malley. Would anyone like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the most logical way to do it, and the way that I guess that it always been done, because I understand that at the AGM there is often more information that comes forward about these remits, and I think that shows when we've been asking the questions about, well, how did number 8, how did the KiwiSaver remit change, and understanding some of those, and also looking at the amount of support from different councils. I looked through them all and agreed with most of them. I did ask the question about the co-chairing, because having co-chaired, it's really quite difficult. So I think our system of having a deputy chair and a deputy chair coming to all of our meetings and learning, because a lot of it looked, well, the writing looked like this was about training your co-chair to be part of. So I was thought that was a little bit messy. Most of them I agreed with. I absolutely agreed with the transport one, and also with the Audit New Zealand fees, because we have been hit by exponential costs of audit fees, and it's great to see LGNZ doing something about it, because in Audit and Risk I did ask LGNZ doing something about this, because all councils are getting hit with those very large compliance costs. So I agree. I think with the recommendation, I think we leave it to the delegate to listen to the remits plead their cases at the time.
Councillor Gary.
I would like to see us form a council position because these remits are important. Many of them are in depth and have a background. And I think it's really important the voting delegate takes the opinion of council, the position of council with that person when they vote. So I think it's really important that we go through each of them and form a council view, as we have on other occasions, and the delegate be guided by that. Just on the co-chair understanding, I didn't see it as Councillor Barker did, where it was chair, deputy chair. I saw it as like a ORC, DCC. We do a co-chair arrangement then, and there are other examples with some other groups that we have dealings with. So I have comments on many of these and would like the opportunity to air those and see what my colleagues around this table think, and be open to other views so that a council position can be formed on each remit.
So the motion has been moved and seconded. So we'll vote on the motion first, and if the motion is lost, then we'll move to individual discussion of all the remits. So we'll point out, of course, that just as the KiwiSaver remit has changed, one of the things that's quite feasible, quite possible, is at the conference, the remits themselves will change as alterations are made, from the people that might have lodged it. Anyway, be that as it may, do we have any other speakers? Councillor Vincent.
It's always a problematic sort of situation here because of that flux of debate at the conference. But what's missing here is some sort of qualification that requires whoever the delegate is, in this case yourself, where council policy exists, it would surely be totally inappropriate to vote for something that doesn't align with the policy of this council. And it's sort of a bit different from Councillor Gary's concerns. I just think that there needs to be an amendment, which I would move, to add the words "in the absence of specific direction or council policy," because I can't support that as it is. I don't think there's any issue, but I'm not suspecting that you would vote other than in alignment with council policy. But I think that is too hands off to be appropriate. Where council policy exists, the mayor should be expected always to support that policy and vote in that direction. So there's no issue there. But I'll move an amendment that adds those words. I've no problem where there's no council policy or there's no direction from the council about an issue for the voting delegate in discussion presumably with the other delegates to come to a position. But that is far too laissez-faire as it stands.
So
We have an adjournment.
yes, so whatever. Yeah, an adjournment 5 minutes. I move that we adjourn for 5 minutes. Seconded Councillor Fiso. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Carried. Come against? Carried. Vincent Pope. So this is now a vote on this amendment that you see before you. So it is moved by Councillor Vincent Pope, seconded by Councillor Lucas. Okay. would you like to speak to this amendment?
Well, yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think this gives the flexibility you need to cope with the debate or amendments that happen to remits on the floor of the conference or whatever else, but clearly requires that you do vote either in line with council policy if it exists, or in line with any decision of the council about a particular remit where that exists. That's all.
Very good. Any other speakers? Deputy Barker?
I feel like I'm going to vote against this because I feel like the word direction is very unclear. I understood when you said it that there is a directive where we have decided on the remit. However, it seems to me like a wallywed when we look at direction. It's a course along which someone or something moves, a point to or from which a person or thing moves or faces. So it's not clear that it's a directive rather than a direction. So I won't be voting for it.
Councillor Gary?
Well, I will be supporting this. From my experience at local government conference, this would be in line with that experience. So there are some remits that we have already discussed, in fact, and I've yet to see, because I have been through this with a fine tooth comb, but we did discuss some earlier. We have council policy, clear council policy on some that have been added. There's quite a number here, and not as many as we've had on other occasions, I might add. And there are some that we might have a clear view on that would be helpful to give direction. And by direction, I'm thinking we are giving our view and making a decision that, yeah, this is the direction we want the delegate to vote in. So I think this is very helpful to the delegate from my experience of the local government AGM, local government LGNZ AGM. And I think this will clarify matters and assist for this council to get a good outcome at that stage.
Councillor O'Malley?
I probably won't vote for this, largely because I've been through this a number of times before, and we've placed trust in the mayor to trustfully and accurately represent us where we go. And I feel that the need to put this extra wording in when we've made statements about him being a trustworthy and worthy man, and then saying, but I don't really think we can go forward without explicit direction, in my opinion, undermines the relationship between us and our mayor, and a reason to believe and trust him when he goes as a representative to conferences in our name. And I would have supported it if this had been as strict and as mandated in the past, but it hasn't. And I don't see why we have trusted in the past and now we are apparently not trusting now. Thank you.
Councillor Gilbert?
Thank you. I term struggling in English, specifically with the word direction. If the council has, on the assumption that my understanding of the conversation we've just had is it is, after discussion here, it is the directive more of this is what we want you to, how we want you to vote. If that is correct, then I struggle with that. And if that isn't the correct definition, then I struggle with the fact that the definition is obviously can be taken many ways. The reason I struggle with it is I have never entered here. Let me rephrase. There have been times when I have entered here believing I was going to vote one way. And then through discussion around a topic, that more information has come forward and my opinion has changed. The direction I'm going to vote has changed. Now, unless we are saying that no matter what, come hell or high water, this is the way we want you to vote, no matter what further information comes forward, then that definition of, or the definition I've settled on for direction is wrong, is not democratic. Having policy, no problem with it, because we have had time to have a discussion, all the information laid out in front of us. We have made the decision. This is the council policy. Therefore, I've got no problem with policy, but I do have a problem with the word direction.
Similarly, I don't support this because one thing that will be happening there is I have 5 other members of council. So if there's something contentious or something has changed, something through the course of discussion, or slightly different or different nuance or explanation, then I will most certainly be conferring with the colleagues of this council in the moment. So, and you've seen that throughout my time. So I don't support this. Are there any other speakers? Okay. In which case, I'll put the vote and we'll need to take a vote.
Councillor Ackland.
No.
Councillor Barker. No. Councillor Benson Pope.
No.
Councillor Gary. No. Councillor Gilbert.
No.
Councillor Lapiso.
No.
Councillor Lucas. No. Councillor Mayhem. No. Councillor O'Malley.
No.
Councillor Vandervis.
No.
Councillor Weatherall.
No.
Mayor Raddick.
No.
Lost 3-9.
Thank you. So we go back to the substantive motion, which has already been put, as per the order paper.
And that's a slight variation on the order paper. This is what Councillor Barker has moved.
So so do you want to change it now? So
With the approval of the seconder, who seconded it? Councillor O'Malley. I would like to just change that in line with council policy.
Yep.
Do we need to move that separately? Or? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
right. So this is the motion that we've had previously in the past, actually. I believe. Yes. So we're now into this. Does anyone else want to speak to this motion? In which case, I'll now put it. Councillor Gary, you've already spoken to it. Huh? I believe. So, yes, I don't know. On my list, you had already spoken to it previously. Does anyone else want to speak to it? In which case, we'll now vote on the substantive motion with a slight amendment at the end. Okay, so, yes, right of reply.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Barker. Okay, so we'll go for this one. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So there we have that, item 10. Moving on to item 11. Which is Dunedin City Holdings Limited Share Capital. Mr. Logie has come to the chair. Do you have any prefacing comments, Mr. Logie?
Happy to take the report as read and happy to take questions from the floor.
Are there any questions? Deputy Mayor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just note in the financial considerations that it says the cost of not proceeding with the recommended option could have significant alternative costs and or non-delivery of planned capital programs of DCC and Aurora. Could you just elaborate a little bit on what the significant alternative costs might be?
So again, if you go to page 118, where we've got the table of the current approved facilities, which is below the current 1.2, obviously the requested facilities, which includes the DCC at 600 at 1.3. If we don't increase the uncalled capital for DCHL, then we will be we'll have to recast our budget for this year because fundamentally we haven't got the capacity. So at the moment, I've got an interim capacity to borrow for this year, which is 515,000, which keeps us under the cap of 1.2. We need this increase to allow us to increase that to the 600, which is what's been approved by council.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Lucas.
I think you just answered the question. So if we don't approve this, therefore we can't go ahead with the budget that we just approved at the last month.
That's correct.
We appear to have exhausted questions. Thank you, Mr. Logie. Oh, question?
No.
Yep.
Anticipating being interested.
Yes, well, we're moving on to the motion. So, is there a mover to the motion? In which case, I'll move that council approves the required increase in share capital to provide 1.6 of uncalled capital and authorises the DCC to execute the required shareholder resolutions, etc. And note that this is in line with the forecast group debt as of June 2026, as set out and approved in the statement of intent. So, do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Weatherall. And so, in speaking to this, I would like to say that it is a very large amount of uncalled capital that we're moving to, but we are going into unparalleled times of inflation and increased interest rates. I do feel that we have been moving as a council towards fiscal prudence as we've been going forward, and also not only with the council budgets, but with the budgets of Dunedin's DCHL, Dunedin City Holdings Limited. And I feel very optimistic with developments that are taking place and the plans that are going to be put in place for improved investments and returns from the council-controlled companies, as well as some the improved strategic overview of the long-term plan, that the budget will improve and continue to improve as we go forward. And at this stage of the piece, it is essential that we do agree to this increase of uncalled capital, because we've already approved a long-term plan and we have a current plan in place we've already approved an annual plan, and we have an already previously approved long-term plan in place that requires this. So until we change that long-term plan, we do need to have this provision for uncalled capital. What other speakers do we have? Councillor Vandervis?
DCC group borrowing requirements, that is to say, borrowing driven by DCC and DCC company, unprecedented spending, has driven us to today's need to increase our debt ceiling by another $400 million. The DCC has basically produced another unbalanced budget where we are unsustainably borrowing to pay interest. The budgeted group debt of $1 billion plus requires us to pay now $1 million a week just in interest, assuming an interest rate of only 5.2%. My personal interest rate, ex the ANZ, was recently raised again, the fourth time this year, to 8.75%. In recent years, the DCC has praised its newfound ability to fully spend and overspend budgets, sometimes to the tune of 20-something%, as some kind of superpower, despite the lack of cost-benefit studies to justify the spending. On page 119, item 11, there is the claim made in our papers today that the increase to DCHL share capital does not commit DCC or Aurora to future debt levels. And yet, all our previous raising of debt ceilings have soon filled with committed debt. And at the outset in this paper, it said we have to do this because our budgets basically already require it. This contradiction is not one that I think can be faced down. So much debt-funded spending, most of it just on maintenance, without properly prioritising that maintenance is unsustainable and unjustifiable in my view. The call that we've had to create the best Three Waters system that we can has not been justified in terms of its importance relative to other spending that we've done, or to whether or not the public are actually happy with the existing Three Waters systems that we have. We have a debt mountain that is rising up like the Himalayas. It's a mountain into which the DCC Pied Piper is leading all our children that will be lost in this mountain of debt that the DCC has no plan to repay. We are mortgaging our children's future without hope of repayment. This mountain of debt is lent to us because it is indirectly secured via the Rating Act against the property that Dunedin people own, our business premises, our very homes, and the city infrastructure that we have built and paid for over 150 years, now mortgaged to lenders. It's all mortgaged to lenders with this incredible debt. Or in the case of our Three Waters, in the process of being confiscated by central government. What do we have to show for such debt? New productive inland ports, new productive industry building on our university research? No. Costly, underused cycleways, CO2 monitoring, and transportation projects that have no hope of a cost-benefit justification. Despite the suggestion of raising even more debt, there is an alternative, and that is to stop spending now. In fact, to recast the budget, as has been suggested. This new debt ceiling of another 400 million is not financial headroom in my view, but unsustainable financial head in the sand irresponsibility. Please vote against and force a proper prioritisation of what we are doing with other people's money.
Deputy Mayor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have an annual call, I guess, about our debt mountain, and I think I was quickly writing down the proper procedure, and we've just been through that. We've just spent basically a year doing our annual plan, written with our community, and it's ridiculous to say that we should stop spending now. We have committed to building a city of the future for our citizens, and in order to do that, the one way that we raise capital is to raise debt. Unless we want to sell some things, which is coming up in our investment plan. Also, operational expenses are for maintenance. The capital expenditure is not on maintenance. I think we all know that by now. And that debt is a capital expenditure. Our debt mountain is reasonable for our city. We've been through all of those discussions in the past, and it's a little disappointing, I guess, to come to this point again. We need to ensure that we have that liquidity headroom, and I did ask about what were the significant alternative costs with not proceeding with this. This is an eminently sensible decision based on all of the sensible decisions that we've made through our annual planning process, and we also need to know that any disruption to the Aurora planned capital program could have significant risk for the company and possibly its holding company in DCC. Potential risk areas include health and safety, environmental, reputational and legal, and I don't think we're about to do that to a company that we own and that delivers electricity to the people that live in our city. So I will be supporting this.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. And I'd like to reiterate Deputy Mayor Barker's comments, is I think we're too late now to be making changes or deciding how we're going to fund the budget that we've just approved. And I think we're when we have no other option at this point of time apart to approve this resolution. But what it does signal that for next year when we come to our long-term plan, we really need to be some very hard decisions about what we are going to be able to proceed with. And who knows what's going to happen with Three Waters. We may still be holding the assets and the debt with Three Waters and the impact that will have. And that's going to have significant consequences for us in the future and the decisions we make. And also the comments about Aurora. Aurora have obviously in the past been looked at by the Commerce Commission, and the plan that they're having to do with their upgrade is basically out of our hands, and we have to be able to facilitate their ability to improve their assets. So I'm like Deputy Mayor Barker, I feel that we're in a position that we must support this.
Thank you. Councillor Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start off just with the bottom line is that the group debt and the group behaviour is what the group does, and we have to give them the freedom and operation, the capacity to do that. And if we believe they're doing that correctly, then that's the level at which we then basically step back and allow them to execute what they have to do. I just want to pick up on the comment that we're doing an unbalanced budget due to interest rate payments. The unbalanced budget was very clearly defined to us when it came, and that is the unfunded asset depreciation for Three Waters, and we've deliberately unfunded it because of the uncertainty of Three Waters. So to turn around and say that we have an unfunded budget due to interest rate changes is not the reason that their budget was declared as unbalanced. And I did not interfere with your speech, Councillor Van der Vis, when you said that. I thought I would wait till speeches.
I did not say it, point of order. I never said it was due to interest payments.
Councillor, it's either a point of order or not. Please don't interrupt.
And I apologise for not speaking through the chair when I spoke to Councillor Van der Vis.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Van der Vis has raised a point of order. You do need to deal with it.
Have you? I didn't hear point of order.
Yeah, I've been utterly misrepresented. I never said that our unbalanced budget was due to interest costs, as just stated twice by Councillor O'Malley.
Look, unfortunately, I can't remember. So, I can't remember what was said, and I don't think we should be going back to try and relitigate. If you're just happy to withdraw that remark, and then we can proceed. Carry on, Councillor Malley. You happy with that, Councillor Van der Vis?
I withdraw that remark, and with that, I'm finished. Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Fiso.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to acknowledge the work of Mr. Logie and his team, and thank the staff for keeping us on the path that we're on. And it is an ambitious program that we've embarked on. And as Councillor Lucas and Councillor Barker have said, it's too late to stop now. We've decided where we're headed, and this resolution enables us to keep doing the mahi that we've set for the program that we've set for ourselves. As to cost benefits and personal interest rates, I think it is, as with all resolutions talking about money, it's about our values. And or my impression of what we've seen ourselves as local government body, we're about looking after everybody, not just the voters and not just rich people.
Very good. It appears we've exhausted speakers. My right of reply, I'd just like to reiterate really the key thing is that we really have very limited choice. We've approved the budget, the annual plan, and our chance to make substantive changes will be coming with the long-term plan, the next long-term plan that we will be working on from the end of this year onwards. So, having said that, I'd like to put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
No, recorded, please.
Thank you. So, we're moving along now to item number 12, the appointment of the hearing panel for speed management plan. So, Councillor Money will speak to the report. Sarah?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start, actually, I want to acknowledge Councillor Weatherall as my deputy chair and offer actually, if you want to now, do you want to be added to this list as alternatives? Because I could amend it at the moment or not. It's up to you.
I would, thank you.
So I would like to amend the motion to add Councillor Weatherall along with Councillor Mayhem as a substitute.
Very good.
Other than that, and that was from a conversation we had this morning, and it comes down to who are the members of these committees and what roles do they play. Councillor Wiley and Councillor I come back to this committee with previous experience of having done it in the past, and I brought Councillor Lucas on with her recent experience on parking, and that's why Councillor Mayhem was there. But it was a terrible oversight of mine actually not to include my deputy chair on that list as well, so I'm adding him on to that as well. Effectively, though, the core committee is those who have had experience in the past, plus one more coming on to replace, and that would be the turnover from that point on. Thank you very much.
So this is, I believe, a councillor opportunity to ask questions of Councillor O'Malley about this. Are there any? No. Thank you. Therefore, is it appropriate that you move
it in here?
Yes, and seconded by Councillor Mayhem. Very good. And so, would you like to speak to the
I pretty much spoke to it when I just spoke to it, so.
Covered? Very good. Who else would like to speak to the motion, please? Nobody. So do you want to reply to what you said? Okay. In which case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item number 13. Proposed event closures, event road closures for August and September. Mr. Drew will come to the chair and possibly speak to the report.
No, I'm just happy to take questions. Pretty simple one.
Very good. Are there any questions? Councillor Fisher.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Mayor. I'm not asking about the reports per se, but this is just me being me. And, we have heaps of these. And can I just understand why it has to come to council rather than operational?
Well, it's the law. Unfortunately, the LTA, the Act is 1974. It's old. There are certain things that require council only approval, and we can't do it as officers.
So, if we were to, as governors or politicians or something, seek a change of law, we'd have to.
We have asked, and it's not one of those things you can even delegate to me. We've checked. So there are a series of road closures that I can do under delegation because they form part of a different part of the legislation. This one is specific to council.
Thank you. Councillor Binspo.
I'm happy to remove option 1.
So, yes, very good. So moved by Councillor Binspo and moved by Councillor Ackland. Yeah, I guess that preempted any questions, but I guess there are no more questions. In which case, Councillor Benson Pope, do you want to speak to it? No. Does anyone? Very good. In which case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
No.
Against? Carried. So now I'd like to move that we exclude the public because the public part of our meeting is finished and we'll be coming back in after lunch in the confidential part of the meeting. So we now move to exclude the public. I do have a second for that. Councillor Mayhem. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So I suggest we...
Do you want to not just do some...
Could we do some?
Keep going. Yeah. Me too.
Yeah, we'll just take a minute to remove the cameras and